Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we will try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with a daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the various challenges being confronted in the cyber domain, the government initiatives, and the way forward. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the increasing incidence of fire across the country, the factors responsible, and the way forward. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026, along with the value addition. So, stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to cybercrimes, the new invisible threat. Someone very famously remarked that the biggest crime scene of the 21st century is the internet. With the kind of technological progress we have witnessed over the decades, what we have seen is that technology has been infused or integrated in conventional domains. For example, transportation, for example, government services, for example, education, commerce. In all these domains, what we have seen is the integration of technology. And with it, what we have also witnessed is increasing instances of cybercrimes. We'll discuss what these cybercrimes are all about in detail. Now, this has implications at 2 fronts. One is with respect to the privacy of the individual. There is a lot of information with respect to the individuals on the internet, what we call as personally identifiable information. And that information has been compromised in many cases. So this, in one way or the other, is an infringement of the right to privacy of the individual, which was highlighted as an inherent part of Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, in the Puttaswamy verdict. Second is with respect to the national security. We know that there are very important infrastructure lines, and almost each and every infrastructure line is now integrated with technology. And there have been instances of cyber attacks. So this compromises the overall integrity of the systems and therefore ultimately the national security. Now, we have this particular column which has been published in the Hindu. It doesn't talk about these 2 aspects in general, but we'll discuss in great detail. What it talks about is the governance crisis with respect to the cybercrime. See, cyber domain has a cross-border nature, right? There can be a particular person sitting in the US, a perpetrator, carrying out an attack on the infrastructure with respect to India or on the people with respect to India. So it has a cross-border nature. In cyber domain, things are transcendental in nature, right? So there is a very important need that countries come together and basically formulate a kind of a regulatory structure, a governance structure with respect to cybercrimes. And this was made possible when the United Nations General Assembly adopted a particular convention against cybercrime in December 2024. But again, many important countries, they have now backed out, including India. We have countries like US, we have countries like India, Canada, Japan, who have come out against this particular convention. India, though, initially it participated actively, but it has now come out. Now, this is what a crisis in the governance with respect to the internet is all about, according to the authors. Now, what they are talking about is also the crisis with respect to the multilateralism, which we have discussed in the other analysts, that how we are witnessing the breakdown or the fragmentation of the multilateralism aspect. What the authors are trying to say is, when we talk about countries like Russia or China, they are really interested in signing this particular convention against cybercrime. Why? Because they want to undo the Western dominance in the cyber domain. When we talk about countries like US, why it has come out? Primarily because according to it, what it says is that such a structure would basically be against the free speech. Such a structure would basically go against the journalists. That is what the reason US has provided. What countries like India have said? India, though initially it participated very actively, why it has backed out is for the reason that India wanted to have the state to have a greater control over the nature, over the data flows. But that has not been accepted by the countries. And therefore, India has come out. India wanted a greater say of the state with respect to the data flows. Greater say of the government, right? Government's control over the data. So there are multiple reasons. And this, according to authors, what it is leading to polycentrism where you have the breakage or the fragmentation of the multilateral world order, and you have the creation of different institutes where different institutes have overlapping claims over different issues. So this creates a situation of confusion, and it basically hampers the state's capacity, the capacity of various states, because there is no consensus worldwide, right? So this is what the crisis with respect to the governance is. But what we'll be doing is we'll be talking in great detail what cyber crimes are all about. Then we'll talk about cyber security. We'll talk about different kinds of cyber crimes. We'll talk about what have been, why this thing is particularly important for a country like India, right? We'll talk about the government's initiatives, the various challenges in the cyber domain, and the way forward. Believe me, this session is going to be, again, this topic, the discussion is going to be very comprehensive. And after the first discussion, you'll be very clear with any of the questions which come with respect to the cyber security. So let's start. So what the article says is, in addition to the various challenges posed by cybercrimes, its global governance also faces serious issues. Primarily because there is no consensus with respect to the overall regulatory and governance standard with respect to cybercrime. GS3 important, security. Let's talk about what do we mean by cyber security. What is a basic definition of cyber security? It consists of the technologies in place, the processes and controls designed to protect the systems, the computer systems, right, including the smartphones and everything, networks, programs, devices, data from cyber attacks. So what we are trying to say is we are protecting the integrity of the computer systems against different kinds of cyber attacks. What are different kinds of cyber attacks? They can be of various natures. For example, we have phishing attacks. What is phishing attacks? Where an individual is duped. There is a kind of a manipulation which is carried out. And therefore, in order to gain the illicit financial advantages over that individual, you have the duping of that particular, the individual is fooled, right? Phishing attacks. Then we have the illegal content. We have online scams, various scams, right? We have the cyber warfare where we have countries attacking the infrastructure of the enemy states, right? Then we have ransomware attacks. What is ransomware attacks? In this, you have the perpetrator, which basically creeps into the systems, and then it steals all the information, and then it blocks the information, whatever the information is there in the system itself. If you want the information back with respect to that individual, from that individual, you'll have to pay a ransom to that particular person. That is what a ransomware attack means, right? Then we have botnets. What is botnets? It basically means a system of computers whose security is compromised for a particular objective. Let's say you can have a hacker, and that hacker or a group of hackers, they compromise the security of various computers in order to achieve a particular objective, illegal, illicit objective. Then we have cyber stalking, cyber bullying, especially with respect to the women, right? Where women online, they're harassed, right? And many of the times they're also blackmailed, right? Then we have social engineering, very important. What do we mean by social engineering? Now, this is a phenomena which in one way also relates to phishing attacks, where the individuals, those gullible individuals who are the first time users on the internet, they are exploited. Their anxiety and fear is exploited. You must have heard the cases where people, give calls and say that we are from the customs and we have recovered your material or your drug from your bag, or we are from CBI, whatever. So it tries to use the anxiety and fear which is developed in the minds of the people. And then what they ask is, they ask for personal information. And then they exploit that particular personal information in order to basically extract the financial gains from that particular person. That is what social engineering is all about. Then we have the flood attacks. You must have heard about the distributed denial of services attack, where different computers, they are burdened. They're burdened in such a manner that the very objective of those computers, you cannot do any of the tasks with respect to that because they are burdened. It's a distributed denial of service. The very service for which these computers were meant, they are not able to fulfill those services, right? Potentially unwanted programs. So there can be identity theft. There can be different kinds of cyber crimes, ransomware attacks, Trojan attacks, right? We have the attacks in the form of digital arrest, different kinds of attacks. Then we have impersonation, right? People impersonate using the artificial intelligence these days. So this is what the structure of cybercrimes is all about. It is a very important concern reason for a country like India, where we are having a lot of young population. We have the demographic dividend, and what we are witnessing is the increasing subscriber base with respect to the internet. It is again a grave concern. Why? Because we have the growing population with respect to the internet users. According to Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, as of September 2025, there were more than 1,117 million internet subscribers, almost 1.01 billion internet subscribers. According to Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, we have already crossed 1 billion mark in 2025, and we are almost equal to the internet subscribers in China. So this is again a very big achievement. Almost 60% of the internet users are in the urban areas and almost 40%. Why in the urban areas? Because over there the tele-density is more as compared to that of the rural areas. Then we are the second largest online market in the world after China. Online market, I mean to say, we have the e-commerce websites, we have different platforms providing services. So if you look at the overall system, we are the second largest online market. And we have a rapidly expanding digital economy. You talk about education. We have different players coming in the education domain providing the e-services. Then we have, for example, let's talk about the telecommunications. Let's talk about the transportation sectors. We have the intelligent transportation systems, right? Or and even the government services, including the Indian Railways. They have been incorporating technology. Let's talk about Kavach system, right? So there has been the infusion of technology in almost each and every domain, varied sectors. Second, the government has set a target that by the year 2027-28, we will be basically trying to achieve $1 trillion of digital economy. $1 trillion of digital economy by the year 2027-28. So for this, we need a very robust structure with respect to cyber domain. Then we have the dominance of services sector. We all know that India has witnessed a kind of a direct jump from the agrarian setup to that of the services-led economy. So we have, in one way or the other, we have missed this manufacturing stage. What has happened because of this is that though we have, lagged in the manufacturing aspect, definitely, but we have performed very well as we talk about the services aspect. More than 55% of the gross value added comes from the services domain. We have a lot of Indian companies providing services abroad, right, where they export the services to countries, for example, in the Middle East, or including the European Union, the countries in the EU, or for example, even including the US. So again, this is a very important sector. You talk about Infosys, you talk about Wipro, software exports, right? Also, we have the business process outsourcing, we have the knowledge process outsourcing, different enterprises in India which export a lot of services to different countries around the world. Now, if you have the integrity of the cyber domain or their cyber architecture, if it is compromised, that is going to affect the overall services exports, which India is doing to these countries around the world. So therefore, it becomes very, very important for India. Look at this infographic, 63% surge in the cybercrimes cases since January 2024. What have been, look at this, the rising cyber incidents. I'll also give you one very important data. What have been the types of crimes reported? We have the online banking frauds. We have people calling and give your ATM, PIN or give your password. OTP frauds, one-time password frauds, credit and debit card frauds. We have the cases related to the ATMs. We have fake news, cyber stalking, fake profile. So these are the kinds of crimes we are witnessing, digital arrests at a rapid pace. The data with respect to the number of cases which is being reported, I'll give you a data, which says according to the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, NCRP, what it says that in the year 2021, almost 4.5 lakh cases were registered with respect to the cybercrimes. Now, this has jumped to almost 22.5 lakhs in the year 2025. So, in just 4 years, there has been almost a 5 times jump in the overall number of registered cases. And just mind that this is the number of registered cases. This is the actual number of cases, the actual number of cybercrimes may be far more than this. So that is what the issue is, right? Important. Use the data which I am providing in your answers so as to increase the credibility of your answer. Use a graphical method or use any method so that the examiner, once you give the data or a fact, definitely it enhances the quality of your answer, right? Now, what are India's cybersecurity challenges? The very first is critical infrastructure vulnerability. But सवाल ये है that what do we mean by critical infrastructure? See, we have the normal infrastructure, the roads, the highways. As a subset of the normal infrastructure, we have the critical infrastructure. Government categorizes or lists some of the infrastructure in the bracket of critical infrastructure. Let's talk about the power lines. power lines. Or let's talk about the transportation network. Let's say the transportation network of DMRC or the transportation network of Indian Railways, or let's say the atomic energy units, or let's say the state discoms, power distribution companies. So these are critical infrastructure, right? In most of these critical infrastructure, there is a heavy integration of technology, heavy integration of internet. Things operate on the basis of the internet in these things. Now, whenever you have an attack which takes place on any of these component of these infrastructure, of these critical infrastructure, it becomes a national security issue, right? Disrupt the essential services, talk about transportation, talk about let's say the power distribution, electricity in the homes, right? If it is disrupted, definitely it's going to have effect on the normal life and endanger the national security. A very good example is of 2019, where there were some alleged Chinese hackers who compromised the integrity of the nuclear power plant in Kundankulam. Just imagine that the security, the overall security of a nuclear power plant was compromised. This is again a very grave threat. Then we have the case with respect to Maharashtra State Electricity Board. Now, it was in the year 2020, where the systems with respect to the Maharashtra State Electricity Board, they were compromised. What it led to was a complete power outage in Mumbai. Now, Mumbai, you all know that it's the financial capital. You have most of the most important financial institutions in Mumbai itself. Whenever you have a condition like this, where there's a complete power outage, this, in a way, it is compromising the financial integrity of the country, right? It is eroding the trust of the people in the systems. So this is again a very grave concern. Then we have the financial sector threats. When we talk about the financial sector threats, understand we are talking at two levels. What are these two levels? The very first is with respect to the individual. By you receive a call that your bank account details have been, let's say we are calling from this particular bank and you need to provide the details with respect to the bank. And out of the fear and anxiety, that person reveals his or her information. So that in one way or the other, this is compromising the financial integrity with respect to that particular person. People are duped. There have been cases where people have, they have been duped of lakhs of rupees. Then we have at the corporate level, at the level of the society, what you can say. In different corporates, what we have witnessed is that there are corporate spies. You must have heard about the insider trading. And because of this, what happens is that the systems within a corporate, within a company are compromised because of the people who are working inside the company mostly. So that is again a threat with respect to the overall integrity of the systems which are placed in that corporate house. So again, very important. Financial losses, identity theft, then erosion of trust of people. See, we are witnessing a rapid pace of technological progress. And these things, the cyber domain is increasingly becoming a part of our personal life. You just tell me that has there been any day or can there be any day where you don't use the internet? Right? So internet has become a very important part and parcel. According to a report itself, what it says is that in India, out of every three people, one person in one way or the other has faced a particular kind of cyber threat in his or her lifetime. So this is a condition. Almost 33% of the people who are using the internet, they face one or the other kind of cyber threats, right? Erosion of trust. So if you have people who again and again are confronted with these challenges, their trust in the overall system would reduce. And that is not good for an emerging society like India, right? Then we have the examples like the SWIFT system, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Now, SWIFT is a system. Let's say we have Bank 1 and Bank 2. There are two banks. With respect to the communication among these banks and around the world, we have the SWIFT system. It is not transferring money as such, but SWIFT system helps to have a good telecommunication, to have a communication among different banks around the world. There are certain banks who are part of the SWIFT system. Because of the leakages, because of the compromise in the security architecture of the SWIFT system, the bank, City Union Bank, it suffered millions of losses, millions of dollars of losses because of the concerns or the issues in the SWIFT bank system architecture. So this is again a very grave threat. Then we have data breaches and privacy concerns. As I told you that we have some of the very important data of the individuals with respect to their biometrics or their personally identifiable information. Government collects these data, for example, in the form of Aadhaar. Now, if you are having a trust in the government, if you're giving such important data to the government, you would obviously expect the government to basically make sure that your data is protected. But according to an agency, a cyber security agency of US, Resecurity, what it has said is that Indians' personal data is freely available on the dark web. More than 81 crores people's data is available. Aadhaar's data is available on the dark web. Can you imagine? Now, Aadhaar includes the biometric information as well. So, if such type of information is freely available on the dark web, definitely it's a cause of concern. Serious consequences on the privacy and security. Privacy with respect to the individuals, and then also the security of the overall nation, right? That data can be used for social manipulation, for social engineering. And again, that can lead to more and more number of cases of these cyber threats, right? Or financial frauds. Then we have the other example, which says that in 2020, we had this common admission test exam in order to get into the top B schools of the country. It said that almost the data of 2 lakh students was compromised. Personal identifiable information, including their addresses, their mobile phones, their biometric, everything was compromised. Almost 2 lakh people. So this is an erosion of trust. This is a breach of privacy of the individuals, right? Then we have cyber espionage. Now, what we are talking when we talk about cyber espionage is the aspect of national security. We have different non-state actors. We have cyber hackers. And these hackers allegedly work for these states, for different countries. And then they carried out very precision strikes on the infrastructure with respect to the enemy states, right? And that leads to the debilitation, that leads to the weakening of the infrastructure with respect to that particular country. Let's say we have a particular group of hackers in Pakistan who are supported by the Pakistani agencies. They can carry out an attack on the infrastructure with respect to India, right? So this can compromise the overall integrity of the system, be it transportation, be it the nuclear power plants, be it the power lines, anything. Discom companies, distribution companies. And we had a case where there was Operation Side Copy, where there were a group of hackers allegedly from Pakistan who basically carried out attacks on the public sector enterprises, on the systems of the public sector enterprises in India. So again, this is a grave threat, right? It affects the security, foreign policy, economy, and overall development. This is but obvious. If you will have issues in the overall cyber domain, definitely the development with respect to that particular sector would be hampered. You would require more resources in order to make sure that you are investing in the overall security of the architecture. You would require more personnel in order to safeguard the overall system, to make it foolproof. So therefore, that would hamper the economic development. So these are also the cases. You can just have a look. In April 2022, a Russian malware planted from server in Nigeria was used to bring down Oil India system in Assam, right? Oil India system, again, a very important public sector enterprises. Domino's India discloses a data breach, details of almost 180 million orders and 1 million credit cards were said to be leaked. 1 million credit cards, almost 10 lakh credit cards. The information with respect to the credit cards. What about the financial integrity? What about the financial security? Air India experienced a cyber attack that affected almost 4.5 million customers. So these are some of the very important cases which have happened. Now, next we have the advanced persistent threats. What are these APTs? APTs are carried out by very skilled hackers. What they do is they basically make sure that they creep inside the system. Let's say you have a group of hackers in China supported by the Chinese entity. And now what they're doing is they, through their techniques, through their skills, they try to creep into a system in India, right? And once they creep in, they stay there for a long period of time, making sure that the user or the owner of that system is unaware of what is happening. And then they try to steal some of the very strategic information, right? Persistent threats. Or in many of the cases, they ask for the ransomware. They basically block the system and then they ask for the ransomware. These are the new emerging, highly technical threats with respect to cyber domain known as APTs, advanced persistent threats, where the people, the hackers, they infiltrate and remain hidden in the network. For example, Red Eco, a Chinese hackers group. This basically what it did was that it creeped into the systems of the power lines. Those companies who are in charge of managing the power lines, their systems were compromised. Almost 10 vital nodes of these power lines were compromised, including two seaports. So that is what the effect it has on the overall security. Then we have supply chain vulnerabilities. Very important. Let's talk about the very basic example of Zepto or Blinkit. These platforms work on very robust supply chains, right? Supply chains with respect to their inventory, where the goods are kept. Supply chains with respect to how that particular good is to be transported or carried to the location of the user. So if any of the component of the supply chain is compromised, then that can have a debilitating effect or a weakening effect on the overall supply chain, right? And this is not just with respect to these private companies, also the government. Government has the GEM portal or there are a series of steps which are carried out in the PFMS, Public Financial Management System, or the DBT, Direct Benefit Transfer. So there are series of steps which are carried out. If any of these steps is basically compromised, definitely that can have a debilitating consequence on the overall financial security, on the overall security of the system, right? Compromise the systems and services. Let's talk about the Amazon, right? Amazon has a lot of its inventories and the overall supply chain. You order so many things from Amazon, Myntra. So if any of that component is compromised, your data, let's say, that is again a breach of trust, breach of privacy. Cyber attack on SolarWinds, very good example. SolarWinds is a company based in US. What it does, it provides the network management services. Network like Cisco does. SolarWinds has a lot of clients all over the world, including Indian clients like BHEL, Bharat Heavy Electronics Limited, or including the National Information Center, NIC. Now, there was an attack on SolarWinds. Its data was compromised, allegedly by Chinese hackers. Now, those Chinese hackers, they attacked on SolarWinds, but it had an effect on India because the data which was compromised of SolarWinds also comprised of the data of BHEL and NIC. So this is a very grave threat because, as I told you in the beginning, that this subject is of cross-border nature, transcendental nature. So an attack can be carried out sitting in Pakistan with respect to any entity in India, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. So what have been the initiatives which have been taken by the government? Government, definitely, we cannot deny the fact that government has taken a lot of initiatives. But the point is, what you'll have to understand is that the pace of technological growth which we have, it outpaces the regulatory structure or the regulatory controls which are placed. So if the government tries to come up with one particular regulatory step, by the time it comes with any step, that thing has already happened. So because technology outpaces the regulatory framework. The very first thing which we can talk about with respect to the initiative is a National Cybersecurity Policy, which was released way back in 2013. What are the three very important components of cybersecurity, national policy on cybersecurity? The very first is making sure that the information and the overall architecture with respect to the information is secure. The information on the internet and the architecture which is storing the information, it is secured. Second, making sure that the systems are resilient. If any attacks, God forbid, takes place, then systems must be resilient. They must come back as soon as possible into its proper shape. Third, making sure that in the national security architecture, cyber domain is also protected. Adequate steps should be taken in order to make sure that cyber domain is also protected and a very important key component of the overall national security architecture. That is what the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 was all about. Then we have Cyber Suraksha Bharat Initiative. What we are doing through this is that we have different information officers or the IT officers who are being trained, who are being given the information that how to basically, make sure that you have robust systems in place. Make sure that these incidents are not repeated. And if any incidents takes place, what learnings can be made? How to make the systems more robust. Then we have I4C, very, very important body, Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, part of Ministry of Home Affairs. Now this, what basically does is that it coordinates among the law enforcement agencies. We have different law enforcement agencies. It coordinates among those law enforcement agencies as far as the cyber domain is concerned. Then we have Cyber Swachhata Kendras. It basically deals with the botnets cleaning. What is botnet? As I already told you, that this is basically a group of computers doesn't necessarily mean only computers. It can be also the smartphone whose security has been compromised. A group of computers working in tandem, or maybe the Internet of Things devices, smartphones, group of computers. So it basically deals with the botnet cleaning, making sure that the systems are restored back to their original shape. Then we have CERT-In, very, very important body. CERT-In is a part and parcel of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Now, this was created through an amendment in the Information Technology Act, and a new section 70B was inserted in the Information Technology Act. Now, this body, what it basically does is it issues advisories with respect to these cyber security threats. Or if there is an incident which has happened, it makes sure that there is proper information dispersal in various agencies, across various agencies, including the private agencies. Comes out with guidelines and other things. Then we have the National Critical Infrastructure Protection Center. As I already told you, that we have a particular subset of the infrastructure known as the critical infrastructure. So in order to make sure that the critical infrastructure is protected, is safe, we have the creation of this particular body. This body is a part of NTRO, National Technical Research Organization, which comes under the overall jurisdiction of Prime Minister's Office. How this particular body was created? This was created by an amendment to the Information Technology Act, and Section 70A was inserted in the Information Technology Act. I hope it is clear. Then we have Defense Cyber Agency, where you have the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force. They come together and coordinate with respect to making sure that their cyber domains are protected, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. This is the information which has been provided by CERT-In. Right? What was the phishing incidents in 2021, the network scanning problems, and then viruses, malware, and others, right? You can just have a look. Cybercrime predicted losses, it runs in crores of rupees. That is what, there was also a report that the overall losses, it goes into millions of dollars with respect to the cyber domain, right? At individual level, they can be less, maybe in thousands of rupees, but cumulatively, it runs in thousands of dollars. What should be the way forward? The very first is enhancing the cybersecurity capabilities. What we'll have to understand is that the digital transformation, very important. The digital transformation in India, it has outpaced the awareness with respect to cyber domain. What it means? It means that in rural areas, you have people who are very quick, or who are very in a position of very readiness to accept the internet, but they are not informed about the steps or the kind of awareness which they should have with respect to how to use internet in a secure manner. With every message which pops up, they give their tick. They just agree to each and every of the conditions without even reading it. First of all, that is in the English language, right? And most of the people are not really comfortable with that language. So the information provided is not in the vernacular language. This is also a very important concern. So people are not really aware. They know how to operate Instagram and Reels on the YouTube, but they don't know, they don't read the terms and conditions. Or if someone calls them, the very first time internet users says that your information is leaked, we are calling from bank, please tell us your ATM pin or something, they just reveal it. They divulge the information. So that is one of the very serious issues. There is a shortage when we talk about the overall cyber security architecture in the country. There is a shortage of technical staffs who are equipped enough, who are skilled enough to basically come out with various guidelines to make sure that in different companies and different corporates, we have these officers placed who can make the systems more robust. Cyber forensics with respect to the investigation of the crimes which take place. You must have heard about the scam compounds in the Southeast Asia, where most of the Indians have been duped. They have been said that they will be given very good work opportunities in Southeast Asia. So they went there, and now they are working as laborers, bonded laborers in the scam compounds. And these scams are being perpetrated by these Indians against Indians itself. So that is a very serious issue. Cybersecurity standards are not in place. For different enterprises, we need to have a clear-cut message, a clear-cut standard with respect to what kind of cybersecurity standard we are aspiring for. But that is not maintained. Coordination issues are there. What we can come up with is the centers of excellence with respect to cybersecurity, adopting the best practices around the world. We have many of the institutions, we have many of the private companies who have a very good, robust structure in place with respect to the authentication, with respect to who basically is given the clearance to enter into a system, right? The validation practices. Then we have Cybersecurity Board. This is very, very important. We have come up with bodies like we have the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, or we have the NCCPI, Critical Infrastructure Protection Center, but we don't have an overall encompassing body. So there can be the establishment of Cybersecurity Board, which has executive powers. Let's say a particular incident occurs. So this body must be empowered that this can convene a meeting, including the private players also, and then issue binding directions. Though many of these bodies have the power, have the regulatory power. But again, when we talk about the executive power, it is distributed across the state police departments or different places. So there is no uniform cohesive structure in place. And also we can come with the zero trust architecture. What do you mean by zero trust architecture? See, important to understand. Let's say there's a particular system, right? So let's say there's a system with respect to a corporate. Now, whoever wants to enter into the system, any external player, he or she will have to validate the identity. Credentials would have to be given. You enter a password or you enter your ID, whatever. But the people who are already inside the systems, the insiders, they don't need to validate at each and every stage. And many of the times what we have found is that these are the people who are involved in these cases of cyber attacks or the insider trading or corporate spies. So the zero trust architecture, what it says is that at every stage, not just the external players, but also internal players must validate their identity. They must provide the credentials with respect to what they are doing at each and every stage. That is going to protect the integrity of the system. And that is also going to make the system or the person accountable, whoever does anything. Because in such a scenario, things are of obscure nature. You cannot have a direct accountability set if you have a kind of a structure where every insider is given the permission to access the system. But if you have the zero trust architecture, you'll be able to fix the accountability. That is also a very important aspect. Strengthening the existing legal framework. As I already told you, that the regulatory framework in India, it runs at a slower speed as compared to the technological progress. So we need to come up with the comprehensive law, a law which is not just reactive. Most of our actions have been reactive in nature. Cyber incident ho gaya, ab people are coming and taking steps. No, we have to be proactive. And for that, we'll have to significantly invest in making sure that the overall integrity of the systems is maintained, right? Gaps and limitations must be filled. Enact a comprehensive law which caters to all the aspects of cybersecurity, not just the simple aspect, but rather even the complex aspects. Expanding the international cooperation, the very basis of the article. Since these attacks, they are of cross-border nature, we'll have to make sure that there is effective consensus and effective governance at the global level, right? Cyber attacks transcend the national boundaries. We can have coordination with the United Nations. We can have the International Telecommunications Union, very important, oldest body of the UN, very important. Interpol, International Police Organization. Tell me the national body or the coordinating body with respect to the Interpol of India, which is the coordinating body in India, which coordinates with the Interpol. Regional and bilateral dialogues and initiatives. For example, we have in many of the strategic agreements we have with different countries, including Japan, US and other countries. We have made the cyber architecture as one of the very core components. Let's talk about the ICET, Critical and Emerging Technology, Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology. Or let's say the initiatives which we have come up, CEPA or any of these pacts which we had with UAE or Australia. We have made the cyber domain as an inherent part, integral part of it. So therefore, we'll have to make sure that we adopt the best practices around the world and also make sure that we make our own systems more robust. You can also just have a look. This is a snippet taken from the PIB. What steps must be taken? Use firewalls and antiviruses. Keep your systems upgraded. Think before you click, which we don't because we want to watch the Instagram reels. We want to install the new app. Use strong passwords and varied passwords, not just simple ABCD, but strong passwords, right? And this is what the the CERT-N does. So again, what we are trying to say is that cyber domain is something which is very critical component, and we cannot leave this particular aspect. We cannot just, let the security or the safety of the systems be compromised. We'll have to come up with robust initiatives, because if we really want to become a digital superpower, if we really want to achieve the target of 1 trillion digital economy by 2027-28, we'll have to significantly invest in making sure that the overall structure, the security architecture with respect to cyber domain is made more robust, right? That will also help us to realize the vision of Viksit Bharat. Very important. Let's have a mains practice question. The cybersecurity architecture in India suffers from various vulnerabilities and threats. Elaborate upon the need for strengthening the government's effort to realize the vision of safe and secure cyberspace. This is also a PYQ. You can just have a look. You can very easily solve this particular question using the content which has been provided. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comment. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have the fire crisis. Who's responsible? In the last few decades, what we have been witnessing is increasing cases of fire incidents across the country. And most of these fire incidents have occurred at commercial places. You already must be aware of what happened in Goa. There was an inferno. There was a tragic fire which was there in a Goa nightclub. And more than 25 people were killed. Most of the people who were killed, they were the poor immigrants from the states like Jharkhand who came for work in the state like Goa. So what you'll have to understand, we have had cases in different hospitals, primarily in UP, where the hospitals caught fire and many of the innocent infants, they were killed. So this is increasingly becoming a public safety issue. And in most of the cases, what you'll have to understand is that the primary reason for the fire is attributed to the human negligence. It is primarily the humans who are responsible for these fires. There's no systemic error as such. But because of the errors, because of the mistakes which have been committed by the people, because of the negligence, we have witnessed these fire incidents. Very important topic of public health and disaster management. There has been a fire in Kolkata, and over there in a warehouse, over there more than 7 people have been feared to die. So this is again a very serious concern. Now let's talk about the gravity of the issue. According to the Accidental Deaths and Suicides in India report by the National Crime Records Bureau, it says that in the year 2022, there were almost 7,500 fire incidents which were reported. Almost 7,500 fire incidents. And in those incidents, almost 7,435 people were killed. Now again, these are the numbers which are registered, which are official. The informal data or the informal numbers would be much higher than that. Understand that the fire service is a state subject. And different states, in most of the cases, they have devolved this to be a municipal function. We have the 12th schedule, we have Article 243W, which talks about this. So most of the states have delegated these functions to the municipalities, right? Now, these are the cases which you can just have a look. Why the urban areas are prone to deadly fires? We have the very first is urbanization, the unplanned urbanization and infrastructure issues. First of all, what you'll have to understand is that most of the constructions we have, they are illegal in nature. And even those constructions which are of legal nature, they do not abide or they do not adhere to the building codes, which ideally you should. So there is a complete flouting of the rules which takes place. For instance, I'll give you an example. There is a particular setback rule. Setback rule क्या कहता है? That this is a parcel of land you have. You cannot just create the construction from the edges. You'll have to leave certain spaces at the boundaries. This is a space which you will have to leave. But go to the narrow lanes of Delhi. Look, is there any body, is there any home, or is there any building which is following the setback rule? No. So the rules are completely flouted. Now what happens is, in such a scenario, let's say there's a fire incident which takes place. It becomes very difficult for the fire services to enter the lanes because the lanes are very narrow. The fire brigades cannot come inside. So that is a very serious issue. Non-fire resistant material. There is the excessive use of non-fire resistant materials in the form of paints, varnishes in the homes, which again catches the fire. Poor urban planning, congested and narrow lanes, because the building codes have not been followed. We have the National Building Code, which basically talks about that. It basically mandates that whenever you are constructing a building, it should have a proper staircase. There have to be minimum 2 staircases. But in Goa, in the fire which we had over there in that nightclub, there was only 1 staircase. So there is rampant flouting of the rules and regulations. Why? Because there is the illegal nexus between the local authorities, the fire departments, and the real estate agents, right? Then we have the governance challenges. Now, how governance is related to this aspect? See, the very first is the political interference. Why? Whenever elections occur in India, you have the incumbent political parties who have the powers. They basically go to a slum area or a squatter settlement and say that we will legalize all your habitations. First of all, those are illegal settlements. And even if you are legalizing, you should provide proper safeguards. Things are not in place. They are highly susceptible to fire, highly susceptible to diseases and other things. So that is one of the very important issues. This lack of public awareness. People are not really concerned. People, in fact, laugh once we, talk about the fire drills, or once we talk about that you need to basically adhere to certain protocols. They disregard all these rules and regulations. There have been illegal factories. See, for factories, there has to be designated area. Go to the interiors of Delhi. What you will find is that you have the home which is there, and in the basement, in the staircases, under the staircases, or in the stairwells, you have small factories. And those factories use very important or excessive fire attractive materials, inflammable materials, the heat sources, gas cylinders. So that is the very important cause of fire. In many of the cases, what happens is there is sometimes a burst of the cylinder, or there is sometimes, let's say, the inflammable chemical which is there. So that can lead to, and then leads to fire in many of these cases, right? Then we have industrial and commercial oversights. We have these commercial places. We have the clubs, we have the night clubs and all these places. Over there's a heavy usage of the instruments, heavy usage of equipments, cooling instruments, refrigeration instruments, right? Or even we have the HVAC, heating, ventilation and air conditioning load. Now, these are the machines, especially in summers. What happens is that since these machines are excessively used, they are burdened. There is the produce of excessive heat from these machines. You must have seen that we have had the cases of the burst of compressors in the months of summers, right? So that is one of the very important reasons, because there is inadequate maintenance of these equipments, especially in these commercial places. Then we have unsafe handling of the hazardous materials. These commercial places use hazardous materials in the form of, let's say, you can have different oils, you can have cylinders, you can have the heating sources, pipelines. Or let's talk about the hospitals. What happens in hospitals? You have the flammable sanitizers, you have the cotton bed sheets. They attract the heat. And therefore, in cases of a sudden fire or small fire, it rapidly expands to the other areas, right? Then we have climate-driven threats. See, again, what you'll have to understand, in the last 2-3 decades, these fire incidents have suddenly increased. Why? Because they have been aggravated by the human-induced climate change, anthropogenic climate change. You must have heard about the urban heat islands effect, where the overall average temperature of the area around the building is much higher than that of the suburbs or the rural areas, primarily because of the grey infrastructure. And these grey infrastructure, it attracts a lot of heat, and it does not dissipate heat at the same level. So the absorption of heat is more, the dissipation is less. So the overall temperature rises, and that aggravates these fire incidents, right? Then we have, what are the key fire safety regulations in India? The very first is the National Building Code. This was way back in 1970. It was released by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and its revisions have come again. The third revision was in 2016. Now, what you'll have to understand is that this is the very base or the primary standard with respect to the construction of buildings in India. We have the state governments who are basically mandated to incorporate the National Building Code in their local bylaws. So as to make sure that the state government mandate that whatever construction you are coming up with, it should follow the National Building Code guidelines. But that is again flouted. Then we have the Model Building Bylaws of 2016, use of fire-resistant materials for construction, installation of fire alarms and detection systems. Again, this is a model building bylaw which has to be incorporated by various states. But again, the implementation is lacking. Fire Prevention and Fire Safety Act. We have different states who have come up with a Fire Safety and Fire Prevention Act, where the very objective is that they need licenses if they are operating a commercial place with respect to usage of these heat sources. But again, what you'll have to understand, as I said, there is a nexus between the officials of the fire department, the local authorities, and these players. So they basically supply the bribe, and again, everything happens on paper. Model bill to provide for the maintenance of fire and emergency services of the state in 2019. Then the scheme for expansion and modernization of fire services in the states of 2023. The Finance Commission recommended, 15th Finance Commission, that almost 5,000 crores should be given to the states in order to make sure that they come up with the robust practices to prevent the fires. So accordingly, the government came up with this particular scheme and it disbursed a particular amount to the states with respect to the fire prevention and management. Fire Safety Week, Union Health Ministry celebrates or does the awareness with respect to the fire safety from 21st of 25th of April to raise the awareness. Then we have the NDMA guidelines, National Disaster Management Authority. Tell me who heads the NDMA. So there are guidelines with respect to the fire prevention with respect to the schools, hospitals and homes, right? What should be the way forward? The very first is infrastructure modernization. We cannot continue with the same obsolete structures we have. We cannot continue with the illegal and illicit structures we have, right? So there has to be focus upon the smart infrastructure, where we also focus upon the kind of ingredients or the construction material we are using. So they have to be the fire resistant materials, right? For example, in the form of fire retardant paints, right? Which basically resist the flow of fire. Then we have retractable staircases, those staircases which can be folded. So they can be installed in the commercial places so that people can easily come out in the event of fire. In most of the instances, what we have seen is people have died because of the smoke, because they were trapped inside. So there has to be the fixage of these retractable stairs, retrofitting with the fire retardant materials. Then overhauling the firefighting is very, very important. We have these firefighting departments. They are not having the proper resources. They're underfunded. They do not have the proper personal protective equipment kits. The breathers, they don't have that. Right? So very, very important. Safe industrial practices. For those hazardous products which are being used by these commercial enterprises, there has to be proper storage of them. There has to be a kind of a foolproof structure where these hazardous materials are placed in a fire retardant setup, right? Proper storage, and if you have these pipelines, they must be covered. They must be, there must be a proper cladding of these pipelines. Climate resilience. So we can come up with very important, these green belts, because what happens is, if you have a kind of an urban setup, first of all, the lanes are very narrow. Second thing, what you'll have to understand is there is absence of green belt. Once you have the green belt, let's say there's a line of homes over there, and this is a green belt, and then again you have a line of homes. If you have a fire which erupts here, it would not flow to the other side if we have adequate these green belts in place. So there has to be focus upon that. Water recycling systems, very, very important in every urban habitation. In residential areas, there has to be the institutionalization of these water recycling systems. Why? Because whenever you have the fire prevention services, fire brigade, which comes, it sometimes, it finishes its water. It runs out of the water. It uses it. So it takes a while for that particular vehicle or another vehicle to come and again use that water. So in every residential location, there have to be a kind of a recycling system. A water recycling system, maybe a pond or maybe a storage, so that can supply the water to these fire brigades, right? Then predictive analysis, use of technology, use of AI, using different technologies in place to make sure to understand that what is the probability of this particular place having or coming up with a fire incident, so that adequate preemptive steps can be taken even before the fire occurs, right? So again, it's a very serious public health issue, and we have to understand that it's primarily because of the human negligence that we are facing all these issues. And there is the illegal nexus at the ground level that must be done away with. You'll have to focus upon making sure that we come up with the robust steps. Let's have a mains practice question. India has been witnessing increasing number of fire accidents lately. Discuss the causes and suggest a way forward for handling the crisis effectively. A simple 10 marker. Please do write. That's going to really enhance your command over the writing part. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the simplified section, we have the very first topic which talks about the very important International Solar Alliance and the implications it can have because of the US exit. Now, we all know that the US President Trump, he's having an inward approach where he's looking at the interests of the US, and therefore it is also compromising the interests of other countries. What he says is that the country, the American money, should not be invested or should not be given or contributed in these international organizations which serve no purpose according to him. And therefore, the US has come out, the president has signed an executive order, it has come out from 66 international organizations, including the ISA. The article talks about that what implications it can have on the ISA. It rather gives a good picture, says that not much is going to happen because of this. We'll see that. On January 7, the US government announced that it would withdraw from 66 international organizations. The reason given was these bodies no longer serve the American interests. What President Trump says, that we have to make America great again, and we should basically invest each and every pie of the American people in America itself, right? Then International Solar Alliance was also an organization which is a part of it, headquartered in India, jointly led by India and France. What is the International Solar Alliance? It was set up in the year 2015 to make solar power cheaper and easier to adopt, especially in the developing countries. So the focus is on various countries around the world, in specific the developing countries. While it doesn't build solar plants itself, it helps countries access the finance, reduce the risk for investors, and speed up the solar adoption. So it's not building the solar modules as such, but it is making the situation or making the conditions conducive for the overall investments in the domain, the finances and other things. Technical capacity. Today, the alliance has over 120 member countries and works across Africa, Asia and the island nations. The US joined fair lately in 2021. Over 3 years, it has contributed around $2.1 million. Not very big amount. How will the US exit affect the ISA? The US exit will not really harm the alliance financially. US contributions made up only about 1% of the alliance total funds. So a very small contribution has been made by the US to the ISA overall, right, cumulatively. Indian officials have already said that ISA's day-to-day work will continue and the ongoing programs will not be shut down. Moreover, training and capacity building efforts are still in place. What about India's solar industry? As India does not depend on the US for solar panels or key equipments, we primarily depend upon the imports from China when we talk about the solar modules or cells. Solar power will not become more expensive. In fact, India now makes a large share of the solar components on its own. As of late 2025, now this is the data which is important in any of the questions which is dealing with the solar energy aspect, you can use the data. India's solar module manufacturing capacity was close to 144 gigawatts. Solar cell manufacturing was around 25 gigawatts and is growing fast with Indian companies investing across the entire supply chain. China is by far the largest producer of high-efficiency mass-market solar modules and cells with 70% of the global cell producing capacity. Can you even imagine? 70% of the global producing capacity is with China alone. In fact, India imported about $1.7 billion worth of photovoltaic modules from China in the financial year 25. This makes it clear that a recent US decision does not push up project costs in India. It does not affect the electricity tariffs. Will the investments slow down? Most solar projects in India are driven by domestic demands. They are backed by long-term contracts with state utilities, the DISCOM companies, and the central agencies. They're backed, right? Investors look at India's power demand, policy stability, and growth potential. US is not the main source of funding for India's solar projects. So the pipeline of projects inside India remains intact. Solar jobs in India come mainly from manufacturing, installation, and operations within the country. Since India is rapidly building a strong manufacturing capacity, we are having different schemes like production-linked incentives. These jobs are not affected by the US climate policy. As the US becomes more inward-looking and slows renewable approvals at home, it may still need clear energy equipments. With the US having supply tensions with China and Mexico, Indian manufacturers could help find the openings either through the exports or by setting up units that meet the US standards. Though US has been pushing more for the fossil fuels, extracting more of the fossil fuels, but still it would need some form of renewable energy. And the materials can directly be sourced from India itself. A lot of, however, hinges on the ongoing talks for a bilateral trade agreement. Where is the real economic risk? The ISA works extensively in Africa and poor developing countries. These regions depend heavily on cheap loans and international cooperation to build their solar projects. When a large economy like the US steps back from the climate engagement, lenders turn cautious, projects can slow down, and decisions can take longer. If solar growth slows in these regions, Indian companies looking to expand abroad may feel the impact. Because US may not be contributing with respect to the ISA, but it has many of the African countries are dependent on the financial transfers by the US. So that can have an effect because US can basically say to those countries, you need not to invest in any of these projects, right? The ISA is also one of India's key tools for climate leadership and diplomacy in the global south. It helps India build influence, open markets, and support Indian companies overseas. That leadership now comes with more responsibilities. Since US has come out, we are going to have some challenges and therefore we'll have to be more responsible. What next? Solar power in India does not become costlier. Domestic projects are not threatened and jobs inside remain secure. The real challenge is more a divided global climate landscape where the cooperation is harder and emerging markets need to work harder to attract finance. For India's solar industry, this is not a shock, it is a stress test. So that's not something which is going to affect overall, India's ISA. That is what we have to understand. Look at this. The ISA is a global intergovernmental organization dedicated to advancing the solar power adoption for a carbon neutral future. It's a collaborative initiative between India and France aimed at uniting the efforts to combat the climate change by implementing the solar energy solutions. It was conceptualized on the sidelines of COP21, Conference of Parties 21 in Paris in 2015. Following a 2020 amendment to its framework agreement, all UN member states are now eligible to join the alliance. So don't think that only those countries which lie within the tropics. No, all the UN member countries. Currently, 100 plus countries are signatories, with 90 plus countries having ratified to become full members. Its mission is to unlock $1 trillion in solar investments by 2030, while reducing technology and financing costs. There are certain areas where it's focused upon. As a platform for international solar energy cooperation, the ISA supports member countries across various sectors. What are those sectors? Through its analytics and advocacy focus, it spreads awareness and champions the adoption of solar-friendly policies and practices, aids the government in crediting solar-friendly energy policies through ease of doing solar analytics, develops, tests and implements new business models for solar projects, enhances the financial access by mitigating the risk and attracting private investments, provides access to solar training, data, and insights for professionals and policymakers in the sector. Right, so this is the mission. You can just have a look. What is the mission? It's also focusing upon the least developing countries and small island developing states. And this is a mission. It's guided by Towards 1000 strategy, which aims to mobilize US 1,000 billions, that is $1 trillion, investment in solar energy solutions by 2030, while delivering energy access to 1,000 million people using clean energy solutions and resulting in the installation of 1,000 gigawatt of solar energy capacity. This is what the analytics, the focus areas are: analytics and advocacy, capacity building, and programmatic support. Just always remember this. We have, through its critical capacity building initiative known as the Solar Technology and Application Resource Centers, STAR-C. Important, right? So this is what you need to know with respect to ISA. Can be important since US has come out from this, can be important for the upcoming prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have a proposed legislation by China which talks about various research proposals and activities which it is going to do in Antarctic. So again, it becomes a very, very important topic. On December 23rd, 25, media houses reported that China was proposing a draft legislation titled as Antarctic Activities and Environment Protection Law. The draft has been submitted for the first reading to the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. The proposed legislation seeks to regulate China's activity in Antarctica. And we'll see that what are going to be China's objective. What does the draft legislation say? The draft legislation consists of 7 chapters and 57 articles. It seeks to establish a comprehensive domestic legal framework governing all Chinese-related activities in Antarctic. It applies not only to Chinese citizens and organizations, but to foreign entities that organize Antarctic activities from within China or depart from Chinese ports. It also drafts rules aimed at regulating the expeditions, scientific research, fisheries, tourism, shipping. A central feature of the draft is its emphasis on peaceful use and environmental protection in line with the Antarctic Treaty System. So overall, if you look at the kind of proposed legislation China has given, it talks about the peaceful use of science and tech. It does not talk about any of the territorial claims, right? The draft prohibits military activity. It prohibits and only allows its limited use if it is to support the peaceful objectives. Mineral resource exploitation is banned except for scientific research. The draft also introduces the Environmental Impact Assessment EIA, supervision mechanism, and post-incident accountability. If there is any untoward incident, what should be the accountability mechanism? Governance challenges on Antarctic tourism, waste management, and marine pollution is also addressed. What about China's presence in Antarctic? In 1994, China conducted its first scientific expedition to Antarctica. Later, it became a consultative party to Antarctic Treaty in 1985. It has since then expanded its scientific and logistical footprint. China operates 5 research stations in the Antarctic, namely the Great Falls Station, the Angshan Station, the Taishan Station, Kunlun Station, and the Kinling Station. This well-established network of research stations in different parts of the Antarctic allows China to conduct year-long scientific research. It can conduct research across climatic, glaciological, atmospheric, and astronomical zones. China also operates advanced polar icebreakers, very sophisticated instruments which very few countries have, right? Such as Zhulong and Zhulong 2. Strengthening its logistical capacity. What are China's Antarctic goals? China's official statement emphasizes scientific research, climate studies, environment protection, and international cooperation. So it's not talking about any of the excessive or military or territorial claims. Antarctic research supports China's understanding of the global climate challenge, sea level rise, and polar atmospheric interactions. Its ambitions are framed around science, governance, participation, and long-term strategic presence rather than territorial claims. At the governance level, China seeks to move from being a participant to a rule-shaping actor within the Antarctic Treaty because it wants to act responsibly so that it can have a greater say in the overall affairs. Moreover, sustained polar operations contribute to advancement in the ice-breaking, satellite navigation, and extreme environment engineering. What does it mean for Antarctic Treaty? The draft Antarctic law signals its move towards formalizing and strengthening its Antarctic presence. It reflects a broader pattern among the major consultative parties using national legislation to ensure better compliance with Antarctic Treaty obligation. But the question is, what is Antarctic Treaty? So the Antarctic Treaty, it came into force and it was concluded in 1959, but it came into force in 1961 after ratification by 12 countries then active in the Antarctic science. The treaty covers areas south of 60-degree latitude. Remember, there can be a question, a statement in the prelims. Its objectives are simple yet unique international relations. They are to demilitarize Antarctica, to establish it as a zone free of nuclear tests and the disposal of radioactive wastes, and to ensure that it is used for peaceful purposes only, to promote international scientific cooperation in Antarctica, to set aside disputes over territorial sovereignty. The treaty remains in force indefinitely. The success of the treaty has been the growth for its membership. 46 countries comprising almost around 80% of the world's population have acceded to it. Consultative status is open to all countries who have demonstrated their commitment to Antarctic by conducting significant research. 28 nations, including the UK, have consultative status. The treaty parties meet each year at the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. They have adopted 3,000 recommendations and negotiated separate international agreements, of which 3 are still in use. These, together with the original treaty, provides the rules which govern the Antarctica. Collectively, they are known as Antarctic Treaty System. The 3 international agreements, what are they? Please remember, important. Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Seals, Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, Protocol on Environmental Protection of the Antarctic Treaty 1991. So these are the respective years. These are the countries. You can just see flags of the Antarctic Treaty nations. India is also there. Now, what are the important articles? The very first article says, Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. The second article, freedom of scientific investigation in Antarctica and cooperation towards that end shall continue. Third article, scientific observations and results from Antarctica shall be exchanged and made freely available among nations. Among the signatories of the treaty were 7 countries: Argentina, Australia, the original signatories, Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the UK, with territorial claims sometimes overlapping. Other countries do not recognize any claims. The US and Russia maintain basis of claims. All positions are explicitly protected in Article 4, which preserves the status. No acts or activities taking place while the present treaty is in force shall constitute a basis for asserting, supporting, or denying a claim to territorial sovereignty in Antarctica or create any rights of sovereignty in Antarctica. No new claim or enlargement of an existing claim to territorial sovereignty in Antarctica shall be asserted with the present treaty is in force. So no country can basically have a territorial claim in Antarctica. To promote the objectives and ensure the observation of the provisions of the treaty, all areas of Antarctica, including all stations, installation, equipments within those areas shall be open at all times to inspection, so as to promote transparency. Very important. There can be a question in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic is the news coming from the defense domain. So India has showcased its hypersonic glide missile known as the long-range anti-ship missile during the Republic Day parade. We'll see what this missile is all about. DRDO's long-range anti-ship hypersonic missile showcased for the very first time. Now, what this missile is all about, it's known as the Hypersonic Glide Missile. The missile system is designed to meet the coastal battery requirements of the Indian Navy. The long-range anti-ship missile is capable of engaging static and moving targets, both kind of targets it can engage, static and moving, and various payloads to a range of almost 1,500 kilometers. The missile follows a quasi-ballistic trajectory with hypersonic speed starting at Mach 10, that is 10 times speed of sound, and maintaining average Mach 5 with multiple skips. Ballistic missiles are boost powered initially and then travel unpowered on a high arced trajectory. So initially they are powered and then they move unpowered. Quasi-ballistic missiles begin ballistically but fly lower and maneuver. They can move in any direction, maneuvering ability in flight to change and maneuver, that is the ability to change the direction at a given point of time, in flight to change the course and evade interception. As this missile flies at low altitudes with high speed and maneuverability, enemy grounds and ship-based radars cannot detect it. The long-range anti-ship missile is configured with a two-stage solid propulsion rocket motor system. These propulsion systems boost the missile to the required hypersonic velocities. Stage 1 of the vehicle is separated after it is spent. After stage 2 burnout, the vehicle performs unpowered glide with required maneuvers at the atmosphere level, in the atmosphere level itself. Significance: the obvious advantages of the hypersonic speed is which makes it different and difficult for the missiles to be detected. It can cover the range of 1,500 kilometers in 15 minutes. Versions with higher ranges up to 3,500 kilometers are currently at various stages of development. This capability will be crucial for the strategically significant Indian Ocean region. Army and Air Force versions of these missile and ship-fired versions for the Navy are also said to be either under consideration or under development. DRDO is working on two key hypersonic technologies. One is hypersonic glide and another is hypersonic cruise. Difference is important, we'll also see that. Long-range anti-ship missile is a hypersonic glide vehicle and includes itself major achievements in the indigenous technologies like materials and control systems needed for sustained hypersonic flight. Hypersonic cruise missiles fly within the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds using scramjet engines for sustained powered flight and maneuverability. Right? So let's talk about the basics of missiles. What is Mach? Mach number is the speed of an object divided by the speed of sound. Speed of sound is almost 343 meter per second. Mach changes with the altitude and temperature. Mach 1 means the speed of sound. Mach 2 is twice the speed of sound. 3, 4, 5, right? Subsonic, which is below the speed of sound. Fly slower than the sound. Key features: quiet flight, easier to detect and intercept, high accuracy and long range. Example, we have the Tomahawk and we have the Nirbhay missile by India. Precision strikes, long-range conventional warfare. Then we have supersonic missiles between Mach 1 and Mach 5, fly faster than sound, produce sonic boom, right? Reduce enemy reaction time, harder to intercept as compared to subsonic, right? Because of greater speed. BrahMos, India-Russia collaboration, Mach 2.8, and Musket of Russia. Anti-ship and land attack roles. Then we have hypersonic missiles, Mach 5 and above. Fly at 5 times the speed of sound or more. Extremely high speed, maneuverable, very difficult to detect and intercept. Types: hypersonic glide vehicle, which we have, the long-range anti-ship missile, which we are talking about, ballistic plus glide, and then we have hypersonic cruise missiles, scramjet powered. Examples: we have Avangard of Russia, Zircon of Russia, and HSTD, which is a technology demonstrator. Now, what is the difference between these glide missiles and cruise missiles? Hypersonic glide missiles, look at this. So we have the ballistic missile course, which is launched here, and it goes into the outer limits of the atmosphere known as exosphere, and then it comes back. It follows a projectile path. Then we have the glide. It initially goes there, the glide, but again it then have this kind of path. It glides, right? It has maneuverability. Then we have the cruise missile, a very straightforward. Why? Because it is with the help of the scramjet engines or the ramjet engines that it is able to have a cruise path, straightforward, right? Launched hypersonic glide missiles, they're launched using a ballistic missile booster. After reaching a high altitude, the glide vehicle detaches and glides towards the target at a hypersonic speed. So this reaches over here and then it would glide towards the target. Follows a non-ballistic, unpredictable glide path, and that makes it very difficult to be intercepted by the enemy, right? can maneuver laterally and vertically, fly at lower altitudes than traditional ballistic missiles. This is also a reason that you have the interception, which is difficult for these missiles. We have different missiles. You can just have a look. Hypersonic cruise missiles. What are they? They're powered through their flight by scramjet engines. They do not require a ballistic booster for a full trajectory. Key features: sustained hypersonic speed, fly within the atmosphere, greater accuracy due to continuous propulsion and guidance, very high speed, ramjet and scramjet engines, right? BrahMos second, under development, Zircon, and we have the others. So that is what you'll have to understand. You can just have a look. Understand, glide is something that once it is given a boost, the glide detaches and then it moves with a maneuverability. Whereas the cruise, it follows a very straight path. The ballistic, it goes into the exosphere and then it again comes with a projectile path. I hope it is clear. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have a news coming from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, which plans to install the vehicle-to-vehicle safety systems in different vehicles so that the number of accidents can be reduced in India. The Union government is planning to launch a vehicle-to-vehicle V2V safety system to prevent road accidents, death, and reduce traffic. V2V communication can be really very important, especially for the prelims. Please pay attention. It's a wireless technology. And the good part is that in these explained articles, the language is so simple that you can just read it and understand it, right? Wireless technology that enables the vehicles to communicate or talk with one another. This essentially means that vehicles can share the real-time information such as speed, location, acceleration, and braking with each other. Department of Telecommunications has allocated 30 gigahertz radio frequency for the development of such communication systems. So you can just have a look. We have the vehicle, right? We have vehicle to vehicle, V2V, then we have V2I, the infrastructure. If the vehicle is connected to the infrastructure, vehicle to the person, personal device, vehicle to the cloud server, the sensor. So that is how it operates. We have the vehicle. So there is a communication which is established between vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to person, vehicle to the infrastructure. So that is how you have different cards who have the information that how far or how forward the next car or vehicle is. So if I get the information that already a very big tanker or let's say a very big truck is parked on the road over there, so I can get the information prior, and therefore the vehicle in which a particular person is traveling, it can reduce the speed and the chances of accidents would significantly come down. That is what V2V is all about. The V2V system is similar to the aviation sector technology, where aircraft broadcast their position, speed, altitude, and the nearby aircraft ground stations receive it. So it's like similar to what the planes have, the aircrafts. It's a crucial part of the aviation sector across the world. Countries most developed have it. How will the system work? According to the officials from the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, an onboard unit, a system would be placed, it would be installed, will be installed in the car so that they can exchange the information with nearby vehicles wirelessly. This unit will alert the driver about the black spots, obstacles, parked vehicles on the roadsides, fog, or any potential threats. Usually, the V2V system can detect vehicles in a 300-meter range. For instance, if a car applies brakes suddenly, nearby vehicles will get an alert to slow down. This could help in reducing the crashes. India ranks first in the world in total road accidents fatalities, far ahead of the second and third ranked countries. We are almost the accident capital when we talk about the transport because of these hot spots, because of these black spots, because of the unplanned, unmarked roads, and we have the lack of lighting which is there on the roads. There's so many factors: over speeding, intoxication, substance abuse, alcohol. So all these factors which inhibit the moral decision making of the person, right, or the decision making, his senses. So because of that, we have a lot of accidents in the country and many people lose their life. So this can be again a game changer. This can really help to reduce the number of accidents significantly. Ministry of Road Transport and Highway Secretary V. Umashankar said that the OBUs, onboard units, will cost between 5,000 to 7,000. These will be first installed in the new vehicles, and then we'll go to the old vehicles. OBU will automatically issue the warning. The government has not announced a specific date for rolling out the system. It is for the ministry's key initiative as a part of the road safety program for the year. The secretary said that the ministry is setting the standard for its collaboration with the original equipment manufacturers, those who are going to manufacture these OBUs, onboard units. National Frequency Allocation Plan, the Department of Telecommunications will provide free spectrum. So the OEMs would be able to use this spectrum and get it installed in the vehicles. What are the challenges? V2V system has some limitations and privacy concerns. The frequency band allocated for the system might not support all the vehicles. This means that the incorrect information can lead to the accidents and deaths. There is also a possibility of error, right? The other issue is that it will store a large amount of data. about the driver and the other things. The whole intelligent transport infrastructure is at the potential risk of being misused. There can be cyber attacks, which we discussed in the very first article. It would certainly require the government regulations and rules to implement. Cyber attacks are another major concerns. Which countries have the V2V? The US is a leader in the V2V communication systems research and implementation. Volkswagen Golf 8 and the Cadillac models in the US come with this technology. European countries such as Germany, France, and UK too are incorporating the V2V. China is another major adopter of V2V. So this can be a game changer, and this can significantly reduce the number of accidents we have in the country. So this must be adopted by various vehicles, starting with the new ones. Let's go to the last article. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, as the tensions rise in West Asia, primarily because of what is happening internally in Iran, the protest movement, the economic protest movement, and the alleged killing of thousands of people in Iran by the regime. We have the US, which has sent its aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and 3 warships in West Asia. Now, this can really snowball into a regional conflict. Let's hope that the region remains stable. But this makes this topic very important. The overall geography with respect to West Asia and in particular Iran. So if you just look at these countries, we have the Gulf Cooperation Council. We have certain countries who are a part of it. We have Oman, we have UAE, we have Qatar, we have Bahrain, we have Saudi Arabia, we have Kuwait. Do remember these 6 countries who are a part of the Gulf Cooperation Council. And over here we have the Persian Gulf, we have Iran, and this is the Persian Gulf, and on the north of Iran we have the Caspian Sea. This is the northern part and this is the southern part, right? Next part which I'll have to understand is the geography of the Persian Gulf. We have the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is between Iran and Oman. This is a part of Oman, right? Don't think that it's between Iran and UAE. It's between Iran and Oman. Strait of Hormuz is one of the very important strategic choke points as far as the crude oil supply is concerned. Then we have this country, Bahrain, the capital as Manama, right? So again, very important. We have Kuwait, a very small country over here. Now let's look at the geography of Iran. We have some of the very important areas over here. We have the Elbrus Mountains at the north. Then we have the Zagros in the south, right? We have the Dasht-e-Lut, the desert, the Dasht-e-Kavir, and we have different areas. We have Lake Urmia, very important. We have Tabriz over here. We have Isfahan city over here, right? We have the river, Karun river over here. So therefore, this makes, we have Strait of Hormuz, very, very important location, Persian Gulf, right? So this makes this whole region very, very important. Iran is strategically placed, right? And it has control over what goes and comes at the strategic choke point of Strait of Hormuz. So very, very important. Just have a look, because GCC can be important or the geography of Iran can be important for the upcoming prelims. So here we come at the end of the discussion. I hope you really liked it. All the very best. Thank you so much.